Grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I wanted to bring up the creator of Fifth Set, Swede Burns. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Swede Burns. I'm a powerlifting coach / writer. I live in Western Pennsylvania. I'm originally from Eastern Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area, but I live in Western PA now. I'm in a gym called Keyhole Barbell, and coach the powerlifting team there, and been a writer for Elite FTS for a number of years. I would say 8 or 9 years at this point.
That's awesome. So I think to start off, I kind of want to talk about Keyhole Barbell. I was watching a couple of videos, and saw that it was in a church. I know religion's a big part of your life. I kind of want to know maybe where the name came from, and if the church was kind of something you stumbled upon or something you had in mind the whole time, or...
Man, I believe in God's providence. I think that was part of his plan. I can't really take credit for it. At the time, I was, maybe not living the life that I should have. And we'll say something led me out there. I had these dreams. I was having these recurring keyhole dreams for a long time. And that's where the idea for the keyhole stuff came from. I had a company called Keyhole Restoration before that. And then when I was opening a gym, it was obviously going to be called Keyhole Barbell. So I ended up moving where I live now in Apollo, which is like a little town in Western PA in the sticks in the middle of nowhere. And I'm from the city. I moved from North Philly to Apollo, PA. So I went from being around 6 million people to like 1,000 or 2,000. And I bought the building purely on the fact of square footage. Like I just basically looked at online. I was looking for what was the biggest square footage I could find, what the biggest buildings I could find. And I started to see there were a lot of churches on the market at the time. This was around 2010. So I started specifically looking for churches. I was like, yeah, that'd be kind of appropriate. I mean, I live in a church, be the closest thing to a castle I could ever get, And so sure enough, I was going out to Western PA and looking at various churches with a realtor, and she had a plan to show me this place. I wasn't even really interested. I wanted to look at this Methodist church in a place called Unity Township. I looked at it and I was like, yeah, this is the place. This will work great. And I was ready to make an offer on it. She's like, on the way back, let me stop and show you this other place. And I'm like, I saw the pictures on the listing. It looks like crap. And sure enough, we pulled up outside and I was like, what? It was just mind boggling. The size of the building was so big. And I had like a bell tower, and it's like over 9,000 square feet. And so we walk in, I'm like, oh, I'm waiting for the catch. Like the yard needs to be done. It needed a lot, it needed a lot of stuff right from the gate. And it wasn't set up to be a house either. But as soon as I walked into what was at the time the fellowship hall, like it had been closed down. It was on the market for like 2 years. As soon as I walked in that front, I was like, this is it. This is the gym. This will be Keyhole Barbell. And sure enough, it was. And I moved in there like maybe a few months later, and it's been off to the races since then. I guess it's been 13 years or so.
That's awesome. That's definitely a unique spot, and it kind of goes well with like who you are and what you stand for. So I think you like you said, kind of led you there. So it kind of seemed to work out. I guess backtracking a little bit more into like what got you into the sport of powerlifting, bodybuilding, kind of maybe some early, not like. What am I looking for? Like mentors and maybe kind of whether some books or you had a specific person that kind of jumped you into the life.
Okay, so I started lifting at a super young age, man. Super young, probably 12. And that was just because I was interested in pro wrestling. Like, that was what was on TV late night, like regular TV.
Yeah.
You watch it at like 2 a.m, like Hulk Hogan and stuff. And so I remember I asked for like a weight set for Christmas one year. I got it. It was like the sand weights, And I just took it really seriously. I did what it said on the box, which was like, I forget what it told you to do. Like you had to do at least 10 reps or it wasn't going to help. So I did everything for like 10 sets of 10. I did like 10 sets of 10 bench and 10 sets of 10 shoulder press every single day for probably like 3 years when I started. And it was like rows too. But like I didn't even really start training legs till I was about 15 or 16. and I had a rough upbringing. You know, I mean, I was thrown out of schools, and I was on probably my fourth high school, and I got a teacher that was a teacher coach named Jim Davis, who had like a powerlifting program at TCA, which was the name of the school, and it's maybe 1996 to give you an idea at the time, 95, and so I noticed that I was like. And I had noticed prior, like earlier in life, that I was stronger than other people because of lifting weights. You know, like I realized, like I remember there was one point another kid I worked with in my neighborhood I worked out with. He would come work out in my basement with me, and his brother was like way older than us and way bigger than us. And like we used to call him Captain Caveman. You know, to give you an idea what he looked like, he was just like this big, like Cro-Magnon looking dude. And we got him into bench press with us, and I'm doing my like 10 sets of 10, and the kid Chris was doing his. He used like a little less weight, and then like with my weight was on there, and then his brother was like gonna try. He came one time, and he was gonna jump in with my weight, and he literally just like couldn't get it. Like, he's like, "Help! I can't get it off me!" Like we had to pull it off of him, and I was like, it was the first moment where it like clicked. I was like, "This works." And, you know, of course, as a kid, I'm like, I'm gonna be stronger than everybody, and so I didn't stop lifting, but I got in a lot of other trouble. I did wrestling before I got kicked out of one school that I was in. I did pretty good with wrestling, and then eventually that Jim Davis guy, the coach who was like a teacher coach, he got me into where it was like competitive, where there was records in the school for bench records and stuff. And I benched like 300 pounds when I was 16. 300 pounds actually when I was 16. So like that was the best thing I had ever done in the school. But there was another kid who was like a huge kid, and he was pretty close, and he ended up like beating it a couple times. So that really pushed me. And like what happened was they would announce over the speaker in school. They'd be like, the bench press record has been broken by whoever. And there's this kid Brian who he was very close, and he would break the records on a couple of things. It was also like at a deadlift record too. And for a while he was close, like around this time. And every time he would break it before they would announce that he had beat me, Coach Davis would come and like pull me out of class and be like, "Yo, do you want to try and like, yo, Brian broke your record. You want to try and break it again before they announce it?" And then the kid would be waiting to hear, and then it would be like, it would say that I broke my own record, so he would never get it.
Yeah.
And like it got him more and more frustrated. And I think the coach was trying to motivate him to keep going, but instead, eventually, he quit. And by the time I was 18, I benched 400 pounds.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it was cool. Yeah, and I was pulling 600 pounds. Like, you know, my squat wasn't anything miraculous. You know, it was like 5 or something like that. But for a guy my size at that time, that's still pretty strong. I was about 200 pounds. So
yeah, it's funny.
That's what got me into the powerlifting side of it. And after that is when I pursued bodybuilding. But what were you saying?
Yeah, that's funny. Like I'm like the complete opposite. Like I'm just starting to approach 400 on bench. I just hit 6 on deadlift. I think on Halloween actually. But my squat's just been always my lift. Like and cleans too. But I mean I don't do that anymore. I did college football, but I'm no longer. And I'm still a powerlifting athlete, I guess, if you want to call that an athlete. But no, but. So my coach Kirby Goodrich, I don't know if you've heard the name. I believe he uses some of like the fit set methodologies for like bench especially, and I feel like I've been getting a lot out of it. So
man, that's awesome.
So I'm ready to dive into some of the, I guess starting with the creation of it, but definitely get into some of the details. But I guess before we get into that, talk about a little bit about maybe some of your competitions when you decided that coaching was more of your you thought was more fitting of a role for you and things like that.
Absolutely. So by the way, I gotta mention I always did power cleans. Always, even through bodybuilding, even into my 20s, I was doing power cleans. And then eventually I went to prison. I was doing power cleans in prison. I never stopped doing power cleans until I was probably in my 30s. So it was something that I always like held it. I felt like in order to be able to actually perform, you better be able to power clean insanely heavy weight, like probably, you know, close to as much as you can press.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So basically I started to do competitions in high school for powerlifting. There were like the AAU, whatever, high school, whatever you do for that. That gave me some exposure to that sort of competition that I liked. When I was still young, I started doing bodybuilding. But so what happened was I got out of high school and I felt like, see, at this time, you also got to keep in mind, 1998, no one cared about raw lifting.
Yeah, it wasn't a thing.
There wasn't raw lifting. I mean, technically people would compete raw, but they would that meant you took off your suit and belt.
Yeah.
And they, I mean, it was like you were doing it to be a hard ass.
Yep.
In fact, I remember being at a meet and like we had shirts that other people on the team would use. It was like community shirts, and I was like, they made me like I couldn't press as much with them on,
Yep.
And I remember Kurt saying to me like, "That's okay." He's like, "That's called raw. That's what hard asses do." And I was like, dude, that was like a moment, a switch flipped. I was like, yeah, that's right, I'm raw. From now on, I continued that for quite some time, obviously, into my 40s. But then I got interested. The bodybuilding bug sort of bit me. I wanted to, like, I felt like I was able to dominate the strength stuff very easily, even at a relatively low body weight. Because I mean, I'm tall. I'm 6'2", so I was not a large guy when I was hitting those numbers. It was kind of like, what? How is this guy doing this? Like, so I must have had a decent amount of like speed strength, just genetic speed strength. The ability to like turn on those motor units.
Yep.
And I think that's something that over time, maybe less and less, as you get older. But definitely in the beginning, it gave me like coming out of the gates, it gave me like an advantage in that way. Bodybuilding taught me how to control my body. That's real. I mean, it was a spiritual practice for me. It was like an ascetic practice. Like being in calorie deficit was intentional suffering. It was like something that it was like medicine for me. I needed it. At that time in my life, I was just mentally, I was in a state of chaos. Like I was studying, reading as much as I could. I was studying Nietzsche at the time. Like if you can think of like someone in their late teens, living on their own in an apartment, like reading Nietzsche and lifting weights. That's basically where I was at. And I did my first bodybuilding competition. I was a teen and I won for my class. And I was like, as soon as I wasn't sure if I would be able to handle it the whole time, but I was like, I'm not going to embarrass myself at least, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I didn't know if maybe getting on the stage I wouldn't be able to handle it. But I was like, wait, this is good. And I liked it. Like as soon as I did it, I realized I liked it. And all the build up to it and so forth. So I did a number of contests over the next 7 years and got to like a top national level. My best finish was 10th place as a super heavyweight at a national level contest, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, at that time too, it was different than it is now. It was highly competitive at that time. Like the guys the super heavyweights basically look like the top pros in terms of conditioning now. This is the era of like Craig Titus and I don't know if you followed bodybuilding at all, but during that period it was very, very intense, very competitive. And so Dave Palumbo was something of a mentor to me. Greg Kovacs, also a mentor. These were like mass monsters. This was the early 2000s mass monsters. It was a period of time where it was just like, let's see how big humans can get.
Yep.
Dave was like 5'7" and 315 pounds with zero body fat, like stage ready at one point.
Yeah.
And I mean, I got up to about 330, but I'm 6'2", so it still was a far cry from him. And Greg was 6'3", and he would be over 400 pounds in shape. And he did some. I was just talking about this in a question that I answered. He did some of the most impressive, most insane lifting I've ever seen a human being do. Still to this day in my life, I've never seen anyone come close. Like, I'm talking 7 plates on incline for reps.
That's crazy.
Dude, this just like, wait, what? Like, how? Like, your head that doesn't understand. Like, it just doesn't compute. It doesn't seem like... And going to buffets with him, like, walk behind him, it would be like walking behind the white Godzilla. He would have 2 plates in his hand, and his little wife would have another plate, and his lats would just be, like, hanging in front of me. I'm like, ah. I can remember thinking the only reason I got so big was because of surrounding myself with those people. That I realized I was like, no matter how big you get, you're still small.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like the two guys I train with, I train up at Evolve in Worcester, and one of them is 6'5", 350, and then I don't know if you know who John Ropo is. He's like 5'11", but he's like 320 right now. So I'm 6'2", like 245 to 250.
Yeah,
So I'm like I'm larger than your average person, but you hang around those people, you just feel like a child. And the amount of food they eat is just absolutely insane. Like I'm like, how are you not sick to your stomach all day? It's something that like I'm trying to learn to eat, and like I want to get up there. I'm thinking I'd be a good 275, but I think past that point, like I couldn't hang.
Dude, you got at a certain point it becomes that's the job is eating.
Yeah.
Like showing up to, of course, going to the gym's great when you weigh over 300 pounds. That's the only part of the day you don't hate.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is just eating and being in misery and pain. You know, like everything hurts. It hurts to move. Like, you know, it's a process. And then like, I said, I would take enzymes like 3 times a day to help with digestion. And like, it was a lot of it would be liquid. I did the chicken shake diet for years, and you know, just anything I could do to help with exactly what you're saying, digestion, you know. And now I'm old, and you know, I still, if I don't keep my foot on the brake, like I feel like my body wants to be large still. So like I have to, like, for example, I was 240 for the whole last year. I decided I would stay in that range, 240. I got down to 240, which I hadn't seen since I was like in the era we're talking about, like pre-bodybuilding. And then I just basically, I do 3 days a week to 4 days a week of deficit, and the rest of the time I eat in surplus, and I'm up to almost 270. It's just the body just wants to keep doing it.
Yeah.
You get to a certain point, like it's like a program, you know what I mean? It's like it just wants to be that size, like homeostasis.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of like something that kind of like, it's like every like 20 pounds you gain, your body gets comfortable like 10 pounds lighter. So you kind of got to keep bumping up and then letting it come back down. Because I got up to like, I was like 253 a couple weeks ago, and like that was like the heaviest I got, and my body was just started like rejecting the weight. I dropped to like 243 like in a week and a half, and I was like, what happened? It's like my body's just not ready to be there yet, but slow process.
Most people won't get there. You have to have that. You have to have a certain mentality to get to crazy body weights that are like beyond what your normal, what you would want from hunger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like my screen name. Now I'm dating myself here because there was no real like internet as we know it now. It was like basically like chat rooms and email. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So basically, my screen name was 300 pounds or death, and that was like straight through for like 5 years until I probably went from, I was 176 and a quarter at the bodybuilding show, the first one I did. So I was a middleweight.
Yeah.
And then at my heaviest, I was probably 280 in contest shape. So that's like 330 off season.
It's like a whole nother human. Yeah.
Dude, exactly. It's like another person you're carrying around. It's like double. And, I mean, it felt like it. It still, you know, it makes a big difference. I used to fantasize about sleep. Like I would be like leaving the house at like noon and like just be like, oh, I can't wait to go to how it's gonna feel to lay in bed with the air conditioner on. Just your body's just, it's so expensive to move. You know
Yeah, it's like an overdrive, overheating. And like now everyone pretty much 275 plus is like they got a CPAP, and they got to make sure their room's like 5 degrees or they're not going to be able to sleep.
We didn't have CPAPs back then. I do now, thank God. But yeah, that was before the era of everyone having a CPAP. Like, I had issues with that for so many years before I realized, like, oh wow, it's probably 2015 before I got a CPAP, and I wish it was 10 years earlier than that. I'll tell you that much, because it made a major difference for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I feel like I said, everyone has one now, and they're very easy to get, and it's just another tool to help you get like recoveries. Recovery wasn't as prioritized back then. It was just keep going, pretty much go till the wheels fall off, and now it's let's see how long we can keep the wheels on the track. So I feel like the mindset shift has kind of been a huge part in the elevation of both powerlifting and bodybuilding.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like there was definitely that you better do your due diligence to recover, but it was more like you better not skip a meal, or you better not get less sleep than you're supposed to get, stuff like that. Like, you better not get up early. You better not walk across the gym fast. It was stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, if you do cardio, it better be under 3 miles an hour. Anything like that. Those were the rules back then.
Yeah. So I guess we can start getting into a little bit about fifth set, kind of when did it first like come into play? Where did the name come from? And kind of what was like the vision with it?
So fifth set was, well, I'm going to have to back up a quick second here. So I went to prison when I was young, in my early 20s. And while I was in prison, I was in state prison for a few years. While I was there, that was where I developed fifth set. So I had access to books that people would buy me and send me, because you're allowed to like send people books. You just have to buy new ones that are in jail. And I had access to everything that was in the library, which was minimal, But I had already been interested in sports science and what the Russians were doing and stuff like that.
Yep.
So like that was something that, I mean, obviously at this point we're far into my lifting career. I'm probably 10 years in. It wasn't like I just started lifting and then went to jail.
Yeah.
So I was already very, very well invested, and it was part of who I was. And I trained really hard in jail. That was basically like training and writing. I've always been the two staples that hold me together, in terms of things that I can control myself anyway. Those were like mechanisms. They were coping mechanisms for me. So I focused on what could we do with what we have available here. I wrote about it in the books. The coaching manual covers it. That's probably the best. If you want to learn the story of fifth set, that's the most information and background that you'll get, the prison that it was in and so forth. I've actually, thank God, I've had the opportunity to rent the prison that I did my time in. And because it was closed for human rights violations, there were all sorts of issues there, man. It was bad deal, bad place. And so someone private bought it. And I saw someone that just somehow happened to come across my path that I was able to rent it for photography, and I am a photographer. So I was like, okay. So I just set up like I was doing a photo shoots for the day, and I went, and I've been working on a book about that whole experience and process. But that's where, in that prison, is where the origins of fifth set lie. And from there, I got out and continued to I tested it and kept really good records with people that I had that were I had like a training group in there of about 9 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, when you're pretty jacked in jail, everybody's like, all right, what do we do?
Yeah.
So I had a group that was that was my group. And, some people would fall off, like we would abuse them until they would just, it was kind of survival of the fittest in that way. So to be fair, at first it was probably people that had better genetics that survived. So for the first batch, everything wasn't optimal. And I just kind of whittled it away, played with it. And eventually I got out to where I am now in Western PA. And I had a full team of people to work with and coached lifters online, probably since 2010. So it's a long time at this point. And throughout most of that period, I've had anywhere up to 30 lifters that I worked with individually.
Yeah.
So like that's my full-time job. Even when I'm not working with someone at the gym at the moment, I'm doing coaching or teaching using various resources that I have for online. Like I'm sure you've seen some of my coaching videos I did for Elite FTS, for bench press, things like that. So those things are the main benefit to me to make those is that I use them with my clientele. It's cool because I'll be at a meeting, someone comes up to me and goes like, hey, you don't know me, but you taught me how to bench press. And I'm like, oh, well, great. Cool. I love hearing stuff like that. I love to be helpful to people that I don't have in my typical sphere of influence in the way we might normally think. Like I don't see them day to day, or we don't have any real interaction, but they still are able to benefit from something that, something that I did, which that's a great feeling for me. That's the best motivation to continue to do this. That's really the only motivation I have to continue to do this at this point, is that I want to help people. I want to see them do good. And, so that's the beginnings. That's how it started. It progressed. Eventually I wrote a book. My friend Vinny DiCenza, you might have heard of him. He benched 603 weight classes raw. he read the book and he was like, "Can I show you?" He showed us to Dave Tate, and I was like, "Yeah." And he showed it to Dave, and Dave was like, "Dude." First, it was like a whole process. I won't get into behind the scenes of us of interviewing and questions and stuff. But you know, I mean, I love Dave. He's a great guy. I love Elite and what they stand for. It's been a good partnership with them from the outset. And yeah, they made a big difference in terms of that book taking off the first one, which the first one was just meant for people that wanted to do powerlifting meets and not have a coach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I would coach at meets, and some of the stuff you see is like mind-boggling, dude. Like you see, it's like, I feel so bad, and you don't want to just go up to strangers and be like, "Listen, do this." You know, I'm always there. Like I'll offer if someone wants help, but you see just avoidable mistakes. That it sucks when someone trains for 6 months and they get 4 minutes on the platform and they blow it.
Yeah.
You know, for 6 months of training, and it's just avoidable stuff. So the whole point of that book was just to make a pared down method of training, a version of fifth set, even not even the full version, because even then I was using sequence system and things like that with my own clients.
Yeah.
But it was meant to be just a simplified version. And that book did amazingly well. It was very well received, and it made it clear that people would at least listen if I told them the rest. And that's when I did a subsequent sort of update called Evolutions, which was just basically everything that had happened since, you know, jail, for example. Like the changes that made it a little bit more sophisticated and slightly more effective especially for certain groups. And yeah, so there was that. And then I eventually did the coaching manual, which is a textbook for the certification course. I have a good number of certified fifth set coaches, you know, throughout the United States in different places that run the method with their clients. And like you're saying, even it's people that use other methods too, having that, like your coach might work something in where they understand something about the methodology, because it's a complete methodology. You know, it's a holistic, it's a globalized training system. It's a holistic approach. It's not like, oh, we'll just do this. You know, it's everything affects everything else. If this, then this. If this, then this. It's, you know, it's sort of an equation in that way.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of, I guess, kind of similar in like the way of conjugate. I guess is like there's so many approaches to it, but the overall idea of it in terms of the structure and the methodology and the approach, like you can be used in so many aspects. But as long as you're following like the pillars of it, I would say it's gonna work. And like I feel like, especially in powerlifting, like if you train your movements properly, and then you train your accessories like a bodybuilder, I feel like you see the most success. And kind of touching back on your point of like seeing someone at their first meet, or like seeing someone there without a coach, or trying to do it on your own. And like as a coach now, it's like you want to go up to them and like, but you don't want to sound like you're trying to preach, or you're just trying to make a quick buck to hire them. It's like you want to help them, and it's kind of an interesting dilemma.
Yeah, it is. See, look, I'm definitely not trying to find clients at meets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have like a waiting list. So but if I see someone that needs help, of course I'm going to help them. You know, I'm going to ask people with me to help. You know, hey, come on, guys, let's help this person. They don't, you know what I mean? The thing is, like, that's how the sport was to me when I started. That's how everybody was to me. It was very different from bodybuilding in that way, and that everybody was really psyched to try to help you. You know what I mean? And whereas with bodybuilding, it was more like people were just like, it's like side-eyeing each other and like sizing each other up, you know? Like, so it's very psychological. Whereas with powerlifting, it was more of a like, let's see if you can break yourself in half and do it. You know? Everybody cheers. You know, it's great. Like you can hate some guy and you still clap for him.
Exactly. Yeah. That's good. Even if someone's competing with like in your same weight class, same age, you still want you don't want to see them fail. Like powerlifting and bodybuilding, it's like the same side of the world, but in terms of like competitions, it's just so different.
Totally. There's like, it's great, man. Like I've seen in powerlifting meets, like where there's groups of people that are together from different teams. You know, it'll be like some group from West Philly, you know, these dudes that I know them from West Philly, and then there'll be like this Catholic school team, and then it'll be like fifth set people, and then like, you know, like Keyhole Barbell people. And it's like, couldn't be more dramatically different between these different groups, but everybody's like, yeah, everybody will help each other, everybody would cheer each other on, you know. It's a weird thing. It's like we're all the same in this way. It's like this thing we have in common that no one else does.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the sport. It's just the environment is awesome. Like even just outside of competitions, just training, like everyone's there supporting each other, and it helps everyone grow. I guess kind of.
I went back to Iron Sport Gym while I'm out here visiting, and that's my old stomping ground where I used to. We had total night on Friday night where everybody would try to total in the gym. Mm-hmm. It's a strongman Saturdays. Everybody's in the parking lot doing all this stuff. I came up with that, man, like with that very tight gym environment of people like a family. But I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just.
No, you're good. I guess more into the methodology of fit set. What are kind of some of the main pillars of the method?
So it's a percentage-based method of training. Okay, it's a concurrent model for periodization. So in that way, it's similar to Westside or Conjugate or even the 531. It's concurrent. So we're training multiple capacities at once. We're not just working on one characteristic like say power or what have you, hypertrophy or strength or So we're concurrently training multiple characteristics, but we're doing so in a graded manner where it's rotated. And so for example, in the MSM sequence system, that is my opinion on the ideal macro cycle model for powerlifting. So essentially you're starting far out from the meet in like a meso 1 that will be more emphasis on volume on assistance work. So assistance work might be mechanically similar movements, might be really much higher volume. That would be something like, safety bar squats or front squats or something like that, right? And that would be done after the main work. The main work protocols also rotate and they gradually crescendo in intensity as we get closer. Volume, of course, gradually drops throughout those mesocycles. Intensity, of course, increases, and that is surmounted by a peaking cycle, which begins 44 days out from a meet. The peaking cycle, there's a taper, but first there's a peak and then a taper, of course. So the idea is to preserve the capacities that we've developed throughout the course of the previous macro cycle, and also drop central fatigue during that last period there, so you're able to express that level of fitness being strength being that characteristic of fitness that we're trying to express at a powerlifting meet. So there's that. And that's like a high level overview of how it works. There's a ton of specifics. If you have any specific questions, for example, MSMs are a big staple. Maybe that's something I should touch on, which is mechanically similar movements. That's what we call secondary movements in a fit set. And the reason for that is not just because we want to sound fancy or something, but because it's a priority that we prioritize movements that are mechanically similar to the competition lift, right? For reasons of dynamic correspondence between those two. Things that are more mechanically similar tend to have better dynamic correspondence than things that are, even if they train the same muscle, it's like, so you could do leg extensions and leg curls and it's not going to give you the same carryover into squat as front squat is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's my feeling. So, and also gradually, I would say to generalize, make a generalized statement about MSMs, they are typically a reduced range of motion version. If they're not, if the emphasis isn't dramatically changed, like front squat changes usually pretty dramatically from a back squat, although they're mechanically very similar, the load being in the front changes the mechanics a good bit, the load a good bit where the load is distributed. And so in other movements, like for example, at deadlift, we might do something like block pulls. For bench press, we might do something like board press. And the reason for that is, you've been doing this a while, I'm sure you've seen plenty of bench press injuries, right?
Yep.
Where do you think most injuries occur during a bench press?
On the chest.
Yeah, on the chest, on reversal, right. So, of course, when we're far into a workout where we've already done a good amount of intense volume, we could just leave then. Or, something that's also going to be very, very mechanically similar. In fact, you can even train path to be identical for a board press as identical to your competition press. So you're actually getting really good, really specific lockout work. And in a word, I would say fifth set is about specificity.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I can now that you explained that, like the MSM, I can see that in my programming. I think the use of secondaries has been a major improvement in my overall lifts, and it's something that I actually use in my programming now because I've seen the benefits from it in just a few short months. And I always knew secondaries were a thing. I never really knew how to incorporate them or what to do, but a lot of my secondaries are like, it'll be like, say I'm doing SSP with chains, it'll be after my working sets, it'll be 2 sets of 10 to a high box, and then, or like bench, let's see, yesterday I did a max 1 board, and then I had 2x10 to a 2 board at like 270, and it's like you get that extra movement, and like you said, you can match path, which, I mean, even at an advanced level, you're never going to have a perfect bar path, so getting extra practice under heavy loads is a huge help.
Another similarity with the conjugate-based model between fifth set and the conjugate-based model is that we both are going to be, and this is not just between us, but also any effective method of training, conveniently, is going to abide by the Prilepin chart, right?
Yep.
So if you look at the percentages, right. So you want to meet probably in that middle range. At least for powerlifting, I think the middle range is good, and sometimes you can even go a little further. Now, when you get towards 90s, that middle range is insane.
Yep.
But as you get lower in the percentages, you can go a little bit further in terms of the total number of reps per session. But I like to meet, or at least get close to meeting, the lower end of that center column for Prilepin with the main work. All right, so the lion's share of what we're doing should be the main work. Like Verkhoshansky said, I think that the first movement that you perform should be the thing that has the highest magnitude of demand. And that should, and if it's not if the highest magnitude of demand is not going to the main work, then maybe that's something else to talk about with your training.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a fatal flaw.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like, oh, well, I'd rather work on bringing my pecs up for a little bit. It's like, if you're going to compete in a sport where you have 3 lifts, those lifts should be getting trained hard. You know what I mean? That should be the top priority. And so, yeah, that's basically, in a nutshell, that's the thinking behind this. And there's a lot of things like this that you're going to see any effective method of training shares.
And I think a huge part about so I got certified through NSAM like a few years back, and I worked at like a Y to just do like Gen Pop because I always wanted to do like training, but now I'm kind of very specific on being a powerlifting coach, and this podcast has kind of been helping, teaching me a lot, having a coach of my own, being surrounded by all these people, and I think being able to pick and choose different methodologies and kind of incorporate them into your own and see how they work. I mean, obviously everything's an experiment. I'm not a perfect coach, no one is, but I really like what I've been doing so far, and I do like the use of AR, and I've been using Prilepin's chart for probably as long as I've been programming. And I think something that I wanted to ask you about is with the incorporation of AR, how does Prilepin's chart, or what have you seen in terms of Prilepin's chart coordinating with that?
That would depend on what type of accommodating resistance, for the most part, okay? Because there are certain forms that are extremely expensive. And when I say expensive, I'm talking in terms of recovery. Here's a rule that you can say, like, this is my razor, this is the Swede Burns razor. Every effective thing has a cost equal to its efficacy. All right, so remember that and think about it throughout your life and throughout the day. You're going to see how many times it's exactly on point. And that, whether it be drugs are effective, right? They're very effective, but they have a cost. equal to how effective they are. And you may not always see that, and you certainly don't always see that on the front end. Same goes for bands, and hyper intense forms of training, right? So like taking heavy negatives, things like that, right? Taking like walkouts where you have like 900 pounds in your back and you can only squat 6. Things like that. Is it effective? I mean, it's going to cost you a lot, and you have to weigh that out. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to make me good at doing walkouts, but do I need to be that good at doing walkouts, considering how much it's of a detriment it is to something else? So that's the way I look at accommodating resistance. And I'm a fan of chains. I don't think there's anything wrong with chains. I used them for many years. I've written a number of articles on this topic. I wrote an article for actually RX Muscle magazine called, I think it was called like Swede Strength, Speed Strength or something. It had to be like 15 years ago. But it was basically laying out like an outline of how to, like, what is an acceptable range to even start considering it. Because I mean, I see people that can't bench 100 pounds using bands, and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why? You know what I mean? So there's a time and a place for everything. Within the context of fist set, the only time we use band tension is during a peaking cycle, and all the MSMs during a peaking cycle are just full range movements with band tension.
Yeah.
So it's just super specific to the competition, and it just does the same thing in terms of limiting the dangerous range of motion after doing the heavy stuff. So like you might hit 2 singles over 90% during a peaking cycle, and then your MSM might be 60% bar weight and 20%, and these are rough figures, they're up or down a little, of band tension, for a slight volume. After that, like 3 sets of 3 or something after that,
and I feel like something that I've noticed more recently is like I'm starting to like chains a little bit more, just because I try to explain it to someone of like how obviously bar weight's bar weight. It's a flat base. Chains are a linear progression up to the top, but the bands are exponential, and I've noticed just how much more taxing they can be, even just holding.
So expensive for your nervous system to adapt to that rate. Now, do they help at rate of force development? Absolutely. But I feel like there's a point of diminished return with that. It doesn't take long to get the benefit from using the bands, right? But it doesn't really continue to go up from there.
Yeah.
So that's why we typically save it for before the meet.
Okay.
Because that's enough, in my opinion, that's enough time for bands. Now, could you use, I would say chains make a little more sense if you were going to use accommodating resistance throughout the whole training cycle. But I think most of the work, this is my personal view, I think most of the work that you're going to do in training for competition should look the way that you're going to compete. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for squats, you should be squatting the way you compete. For bench, you should be benching the way you compete. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how you play.
Yep.
Right?
And I'm currently like in my off season right now, but I'll be starting my peak in I think mid-January, because I'm competing in March, and like I've just been doing so much SSB work and all these board presses, and I absolutely hate the SSB because it humbles me to a whole different level. But I mean, it works, and I've seen so much progress from just all these extra little tools. But
wait till you get old. That's all you can do. I can't even hold a bar on my back anymore, but I can SSB squat. I mean, I did over 800 pounds over COVID when we had that lockdown. I was like, became my goal, and I was just like squat twice a week. That was, but yeah, you can get really strong with that. But like I said, eventually, at some point, you end up, that's all you can do. I'm sure the same is true for Dave. I'm pretty sure. I don't think he can hold a straight bar on his back either anymore.
Yeah, and I feel like some of these specialty bars, I've seen a couple different approaches to it. Like specifically with the SSB, I know some coaches or some athletes will pretty much use the SSB until they're like 4 weeks out just to save their shoulders. But there's got to be a crossover to where if you're not training the competition lift close enough to the meet, the movement pattern just gonna be off.
Yeah, see, I think it's too different. I think there's too much of a departure from the competition lift with an SSB. Not to say that you're not getting benefit from it, but for it to be the main form of training.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think it's the if you can't hold that bar on your back, I mean, like I said, you can get strong. You can get to where you're squatting 800 pounds at the safety bar. But if you can't hold that bar, what makes you think you're going to be able to just hold it on your back?
Yeah.
when suddenly you have to hold 800 pounds, that's most of the stress of a squat is holding that weight on your back. Why do you think it affects your bench press so much in a meet?
Yeah.
Like whether or not like bench only guys compared to full power guys, it's a dramatic difference night and day if you don't got to squat first. But if you got to squat first, that hammers your shoulders and pecs holding that weight.
Yeah.
You don't have that problem at all. It's all lats when you're with the safety squat bar. You're just bracing. You know, it's totally different. So I think there's don't get me wrong, I love safety squats, and that's mainly all I can do now in terms of squats. So of course I do the crap out of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I guess one of my final questions about Fifth Set is obviously you do coaching, but you have programs of your own. In terms of like modifications to maybe some of their programming or like the individualistic approach, what kind of is one of the main differences between like if I were to just run one of your programs or have you be my coach?
In terms of programming, what's one of the main differences?
Yeah.
There's not a huge difference. It's not. I mean, like there's program. That's going to be very similar to what if you buy a program from me, it's going to be very similar to what I would have most people do. The difference is going to be individualization and just sort of tweaking everything as we go. You deal with injuries, minor things come up throughout the course of the training year. I have. At any given moment, I'm working around a bunch of little ouchies with my clients, you know what I mean? And we're making minor adjustments here or there, just keeping people in the game. And, but yeah, it's just a matter of, for the most part, the programming is not a dramatic departure. Depending on how far away from a meet you are, like it's methodized. At this point, we have thousands of performances. We have a lot of data, a bigger data pool than I've ever seen from anyone else. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's a fact.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I didn't just take these things and not pay attention to what I was doing. I've kept very good records. I have very good information like that attempt selection protocol that we use, the 90, 97, 104, and 102.5 for bench. That is, I mean, that's the gold standard at this point. And that came from regression analysis of looking at performance data. You know, who failed? What made them fail? Now, were jumps greater than 8%? There's a crazy deviation, right?
Yeah.
When you make a jump greater than 8%, it's crazy. It goes off the rails wildly quickly, even with weights they've definitely done. Like the likelihood of going from 90 to 98, the likelihood of you missing at 98, you hit not that long ago, it's very high, but you can hit 97 and 104, you know? And that's, I mean, and we're like 80% for the average person, over 90 for me coaching it. But with other people running the method and using the attempt selection, they still get over 80%.
That's awesome.
I've had people that run totally different methods of training and just use the data from the peaking cycle, whatever kind of peaking cycle they did, and my attempt selection protocols, and they still get the same success. So, I mean, it's some of this stuff is, I mean, we're different. Everybody likes to think they're special. You know, everyone's an individual, but we have a lot more in common than we do that separates us. You know, we have much more in common than we do different between us, you know, in terms of our abilities as humans, that we can learn from each other. You know, more than there is that whole idea of like, well, like you go to the doctor and you got a heart. You're like, I don't know, I got heart palpitations. He's like, oh, we're gonna do an echocardiogram. You're like, oh, I don't know if that's the right test for my heart, doc.
Yeah.
It's the right shut up. It's the right test. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what you think. We are, and it's weird. That's the sort of American characteristic that we all think our opinion matters.
Yep.
Like we all think like, oh, well, I have a vote. Like, no,
no, you don't. It doesn't mean shit.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not when it comes to being right or wrong. I mean, your opinion is, you have the right to your opinion, but it's, you know, you don't have the right to be correct.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, there is a lot. I think there's far too much individualization in terms of the way people set up programming, and I think a lot of it is just guesswork. And they'll have people doing things like, oh, well, like today I started training and I didn't realize how sore my triceps still were until I started pressing, and then as soon as I got weight on my, and I'm like, oh, and then they're like, oh, here's an opportunity to pivot. Like they'll make a post about it. Here's the thing, dude, like, how do you not know that you're in that state of disrepair before you get to the gym? Like, is this your first week on this new program? Or like, is the person guessing that made up the amount of volume, the amount of intensity that you're applying to your training in a given period of time. The thing is, we can generalize most things in training, and when we get too far away from generalizing because we want to be like, hey, I'm going to give you really good hyper specific programming, that special attention, you're just wrong most of the time. You know what I mean? Because the further you deviate from that generalized approach, the likelihood that you're wrong goes through the roof. And that's not to say that you don't tweak and modify little things.
Yeah.
But right is right.
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole idea, like there's really no right or wrong way to train, but I mean, there definitely is a wrong way to train. Like there's way too much information out there for you to be trying this new guru shit to just be that special guy. Just use what you've learned, read a book, learn some things, take some things from them and see what, like you're still seeing what works, but you don't make up shit. Like take stuff that's been proven.
I don't know about you, but like for me, whenever I hear people say like, "Well, I'm waiting to see what my programming is from my coach for this week because like it's based on what I did last week," and I'm like, if you don't know enough about a person in terms of their recoverability, adaptability, motor potential, the things that make them suck or be good at the sport that you're coaching them in, to the point where you have to actually adjust each session based on the previous session.
Yeah.
Like it's guesswork at that point.
Yeah.
Like it's madness. I can lay out programming for someone that if I realistically, this is the truth, I could lay out 2 full mesocycles of programming and a peak where just if this then this, if this then this, right? As far as that goes, with deloads in the mix when they're scheduled, right? If this then this, and have no issues with out of 100 people, 98 of them have 0 issues all the way to the meet. You're telling me you're just going to guess on each individual, make little adjustments? I'm going to really optimize, right? That's the thing, is like I'm optimizing. We got to make sure. I don't know if that's optimal. That's the new term. That's like a big term in coaching now.
Yeah.
I got to make sure this is optimal. Like you're much more likely to make it suboptimal by changing things that have worked for thousands of people.
Yeah. And for me, my approach is like I program in like 2-week blocks, but I have a future plan.
You know what's going on.
Yeah, I give them 2 weeks, but I know what my plan for them is 2 months down the road.
Right. That's a client retention thing also, right? Like, you don't want to give people here's 12 weeks of programming, and they're like, all right, bye. I've never paid you. Right? So there's definitely, I understand there is that side of it, right? You have to sort of titrate to some degree, whether it be with the programming or with the coaching. The way that I handle that is on the back end with the coaching, because I give direct video review to every one of my clients.
Yep.
So like I watch at least 5 to 7 sets of their training. I watch every session and I give them feedback, cues. We have a movement correction system using cues. I say, we need to focus on this next time through, this, in this order. Boom, I have a grading system. Might be, you got 3 out of 4 on this today. And then when they get 4 out of 4, it means something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's something, they're getting value in that respect. So it's not just that I'm like hiding what the next secret program thing is. I do know people like that are friends of mine, colleagues, people that do this, that like, they don't give people the next workout.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you not give first of all, how are you micromanaging in someone's life that much that every time they go to the gym, you have to have an interaction with them? Like, what? I mean, I can see how if you're doing personal training, but that's not what coaching is.
Yeah, it's so different.
It's a different deal. Anyway, I'm getting off topic a little bit, but
So I guess we can kind of wrap things up here. So I like to ask my question at the end, but I'm gonna kind of change it a little bit. So I usually ask if you could give someone going into a new meet a word of advice, or like their first meet, but I'm gonna change it to if you could give a coach a word of advice for maybe going to a first meet for one of their athletes. What would you say?
Have them warm up for squat early. Whenever you think they're going to squat, whatever you think a good time is, start 20 minutes earlier than that, right?
Okay.
I think that's probably the biggest issue I see new coaches run into. And then also familiarize yourself with the order of operations in terms of the various lists and so forth. Because I've seen people go up and they're staring at the flight lists. And like they have a T-shirt that says coach, and they're just looking at it like it's a Rubik's cube. You know what I mean? Like, understand what a flight is, understand what attempts are, understand what a session is, So in other words, the order of operations for me, the way things are supposed to go. So you know what to expect, because if you don't know what you're doing, your client is going to be terrified, right? Because they're like, now my coach doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas it's easy. And I would say the best thing is get there early. Like I said, start warming up. I have people on the floor doing bird dogs and, side bridges and all their activation stuff way before they even get under the bar. And then they're under that bar, hit the bar twice.
Yep.
Have clients hit the bar twice.
Okay.
Try to get everything done. I would say try to have your client ready 5 minutes before their flight starts.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, think of it that way, right? Because if they have to wait 15 minutes, they're going to have to wait 15 minutes between attempts anyway, right? It's much better than having to do 2 quick warm-ups and then run up on the platform for your opener of the first lift of the day. Yeah, so that would be my, the short version of my advice.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to, I wanted to thank you again for coming on. It was a great conversation. Honored to have you on, and looking forward to staying in touch with you.
Happy to help, man. Yeah, please do keep in touch.
For sure. Thank you.
You got it, man.